buffers in the beginning, so I'll give it a minute. Hi, everybody. So hopefully a couple people jump on. We'll give it a couple minutes here, a couple seconds to show up for people. Awesome. Alrighty. Hello, everyone. My name is Jackie Meyer. Today I'm going to be talking about managing screen time with your kiddos. I'm hoping some of you guys that we've talked to over the last couple weeks are tuning in. Some of my own patients' families were interested, so I hope you guys can watch this or watch the recording and get some fun ideas. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Jacqueline Meyer. I'm an occupational therapist with Medical Support Services. I have 5 years of experience in the field. All 5 of those years have had a huge part of it was outpatient pediatrics. Actually, the whole time I've been graduated, I've been in outpatient pediatrics. I work on a lot of things in outpatient pediatrics. It's a very vast job with a lot of variety and things going on, but most importantly for you guys to know today, I have a lot of experience with behavioral management. I have lots of experience with sensory regulation techniques, and I also have a lot of experience with executive functioning, which is those deep thinking skills that kids develop. Outside of work, I'm very family oriented. I have a big family. I actually have 6 nieces, 1 nephew, and my first one on the way next year, so I really can't get away from kids. They're in my life no matter what. So inside work or outside work, I'm around kids. So that's a little bit about my experiences today. And again, today's topic is on managing screen time. I'm going to go over my objectives next on what I'd like to talk with you guys about today. I have a couple helpers behind the scenes that are going to let me know when you guys ask questions. So feel free to put them in the comments if you guys have questions along the way. They'll let me know and interject, and hopefully I have an answer for you. If not, I'll find a reference and a resource for you guys. So let's get started. I'll give you an overview of what we're going to talk about. So what I'd like to talk about today, first and foremost, we are going to be looking at how technology and its role in our lives currently, what it currently looks like in our lives, how are we using it and why. We'll talk about the types of screen time, some differences between the different types of screen times. I'll provide you with some research-based information on the effects of technology and screens on our kiddos' minds and their body, their development. I'll also specifically talk about their sensory systems and how their sensory systems are dramatically affected by screens as well. As many of you know, as occupational therapists, sensory systems are our wheelhouse, so I'll have some detailed information for you guys on that. I'm going to go over some signs to look for that there might be an imbalance with your child and their screen time, and how and some negative impacts to be looking for. I'll provide some modifications and suggestions to manage screen time within your own family's lives. We're talking a lot about kids today, and you guys might have specific questions related to your own, just your kids, but you'll notice as I go throughout, it's really a whole family dynamic that we need to address. So finding balance within your family is going to be some of my huge suggestions today. And lastly, I'll give you a couple resources for you guys to hang on to, and I'll have our marketing team add it to our website for you guys to reflect on. All right. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that technology is not going away. I'm not here to tell you that you need to take technology out of your lives. We are living in a digital era. And technology is ingrained into our culture, into our society. It's not going anywhere. However, for some of us, we were raised on the idea that our physical world and our digital world were separate. For example, our physical world was where we connect with family, where we connect with friends, where we share experiences, we grow our social skills. And the digital world was meant for entertainment, and possibly you incorporated it into work. But there was that separation for us when we were growing up and when we were being raised, and then when we started using this technology. I think first and foremost we need to acknowledge how new the idea of having an iPhone in your pocket at every moment is. It's very new concept. I think it was 2004 the first iPhone. I I think it was 2004. So it's a very new concept. I do have some research to back up things today, but I know there's going to be more out there for you guys in the next few years as we've been here with screens in our pockets for probably about 15 to not even 20 years yet. So lots more to come. So for us, we might have had that separation between the physical world and the digital world. But for our younger generations, this is not really the case anymore. It's as if their physical world and their digital world are kind of being merged into one. So think about social media, how it's used for sharing our life experiences, and sharing events that are actually happening in real time in the real world, but we're promoting those through digital media. That's an exact way of how those are being merged together. So what's happening in the real world, what's happening in the physical world can't be deciphered as easily for children because of how it's been merged their entire life. They see families on FaceTime as a normal physical way of connecting, whereas we see it as an alternative, but we would maybe prefer that in-person connection. So there's definitely a distinction between generations and how they've been exposed to technology, but it's not going away. So we need to find ways to balance it within our lives and to analyze how it's affecting development as well. So I bring up the idea of these worlds being combined because it provides a little bit more insight into how hard it can be to balance that time between technology and screens throughout everyone's lives in the family. So my next point to bring up would be a concept that I heard in a podcast at some point called the 3 C's of technology. These 3 C's of technology are a way of dividing the ways we use technology in our lives. So the 3 C's of technology include creating, connecting, and consuming. So let's talk about the first one, creating. So technology is used a lot for creating, more than you probably would think, especially if we're going to be talking about our children in that school setting. They're getting tablets, they're getting MacBooks, and they're doing their curriculum, they're doing their education, they're learning through some of that digital, through some of that technology. More concretely, using an app on an iPad that, is for painting. That's a concrete, they're creating artwork. But it can also look like maybe an assistive device that allows children to communicate with us. That's creating their voice, it's creating their processes and learning in itself is a way of creating. We're creating those synapses in our head, we're learning new neural pathways, and we're creating all of that from scratch. So creating's huge, creating's been a huge part of technology. That's how technology's enhanced through the years as well. So we kind of get creativity. That's where I think the heart of technology started. The second C is connecting. So not that I want to bring it up, but we learned a lot about this in 2020. We learned how to use our technology to connect with individuals. Connecting through technology could include FaceTime with family, developing social skills through like a live video game. A lot of adolescents and peers now are actually learning social skills through connecting with their friends online. Sharing fun news or pictures over text message, all examples of connecting. I think we can all agree that in 2020 would have been a lot more lonely if we weren't able to connect with that technology piece. So it's definitely a positive attribute of technology that we have been able to utilize over the last year. So for the last C is consuming. Some examples of consuming would be watching something on your phone for entertainment, scrolling through TikTok, scrolling through Facebook. That's one example of how maybe adults are using it. Children, maybe you have your child passively sit in front of that screen for relaxation, to calm their body down so that they can attend to a meal time. Basically, the idea of consuming is happening whenever you are taking information from the screen but it has no better effect or reason other than just that enjoyment and entertainment piece of it. We're not learning from it, we're not connecting from it, we're just consuming it. So without going into too much detail, I think it's really important to state that technology is literally being designed for us to consume more and more and more. I say this because I want to let you guys know that there's some blame to place on big companies for this. Ourselves are getting stuck in that consuming category because of the way that they're developing their technology. So I'll talk a little bit more about the consuming when I talk about the brains of children and what our brains are actually doing when we're watching and consuming some technology. It'll come up a little bit later. So those are the 3 C's to keep in mind. And when I talk throughout this presentation about balance, I want you guys to come back to those 3 C's and think about balance as how you are balancing the use of technology. Within those 3 C's, are you consuming for 90% of the time you're using technology and connecting for 5-10%? Or is it pretty balanced? And then the second part of that balancing act is how it fits into your daily life and that physical world that we were talking about. Okay, so taking into account everything I said about the way we use technology, the way the digital era is here to stay, it's really important that we, ourselves, the adults, caregivers, role models for these children, that we reflect on our own use of screens and technology. We can't ask somebody to balance their world if we aren't being a good role model for that balance ourselves. So are you creating, connecting, consuming on a balanced level, or are you consuming the majority of the way you use technology? I do want to say I'm not saying that we can never consume. I'm not saying that the relationship, if you consume TikTok videos, those types of things, I'm not saying that your relationship with technology is bad if you are consuming entertainment. The relationship between technology and your family, so your family's relationship with technology is not either good or bad. There's a lot of dynamics to work through, like any relationship, and it requires some working through and finding that balance like I talked about. So a really good example I like to talk about is fast food. So we all know fast food is not good for us to have every day. That's not gonna be our meal every day. But occasionally, given maybe outside factors, whether it's timing, budget, whatever, you might get fast food for your family. And you have found or are working to find that balance of what makes sense for your family with fast food. So it's the same thing with technology. You really need to find what fits in and what's promoting the best, your best self, your kid's best self, your significant other's best self, and facilitating the family dynamic that you really want. Everything is about balance. Hope I don't say that a million more times in this presentation, but I probably will. All right, next, let's talk about some types of screen time. And some ways to sort it and separate out some different types. So most relevant to children and families, I'll kind of talk about how the technology is sorted into those categories in relation to your children too. So first, I'd like to talk about the idea of passive screen time and active screen time. So passive types of screen time would include that a child is purely observing information from a screen. They are using their senses to take in the information, but they're not using any processing centers of their brain to do anything with that information. It's just coming in. That would be passive screen time. Active screen time and active engagement with screens could include things like watching a video and talking about it with their parents on what's going on, watching a video of the hokey pokey and doing the hokey pokey, using an app that requires tracing letters for handwriting practice, playing a game with friends, those are ways that they're using different centers of their brain and they're actively engaging their brain into what they're seeing on that screen. So really important to kind of decipher those two apart. Another way to find differences in the types of screen time is by the sensory stimuli that's provided during the activity. So I'm just going to give some I think an example would suit this best. So for example, if you and your family are having a movie night, you're seated on the couch, 10, 15 feet, however long your living room is, away from the television, and you're watching maybe a slow moving movie on Disney Plus. You're watching a Disney princess movie, you're watching, I don't know, pick a movie. Finding Nemo is one of my favorites. So you're watching Finding Nemo. And the input that movie and that screen is giving you and your family is a lot lower of a level of sensory stimuli than an opposite example would be flipping through, I don't know if people even play this anymore, but like Fruit Ninja on your phone, and it's like 3 feet away from your face, you're swiping, you're seeing the colors flash, you're seeing the music change, and it's right there in your face. Those are very different types of sensory stimuli that your body is getting. Now add in the conversations that families can add while watching a movie in the living room during family movie night. Then that adds a whole nother dynamic of that active piece. So we need to look into what is that technology, what is that screen doing for our sensory systems too? Is it overloading it, or is it the just right balance of giving us sensory input but not too much? So I have a couple more notes on this slide about the types of screen time, and they're more just ideas and things to keep in your mind. So it's really important not to get, for families, not to get stuck on that the problem is the amount of screen time. My child's on the screen too much. They can't put the thing down, they're always on it too much. Although I will provide you in a little bit with the actual guidelines from the American Association of Pediatrics on the guidelines for how much time in hours per day of screen time recommended. It isn't about the time completely. It's also about the quality of the screen time, and this directly ties back to creating, connecting, consuming. The difference being an educational app versus YouTube, for instance. Clear differences in the type of screen time that those two things are. And I think families get stuck on, okay, 1 hour a day, but you can sit there for a solid hour and flip through YouTube because you're allowed an hour a day, rather than spending the hour on separate educational apps or watching movies with families and talking about things. So don't get stuck on the amount and really focus on the type and the content that's in there. So that's my next point, is the content of the media is what counts. Not all media is bad. I'm not saying YouTube's bad either. It came out like that. There can be really good things on YouTube, really good educational videos. I talked about the Hokey Pokey. Hokey Pokey is great. In OT at the clinics, we use YouTube all the time for dance moves. Freeze dance is a winner by us. So it is the content. Not all media is bad, but it does require supervision from an adult to monitor what is appropriate and what's not appropriate. So those are some different types of screen time. We're going to go into a little bit of some scientific information for you guys. So there's a lot of information out there on the effects of screen time on X, Y, Z developmental milestone for children. But I just picked out a few that I think would really help you if you are still contemplating at this point in the presentation, why does all this matter for my child? Why does it really affect them? So the first one I want to talk about is the idea of melatonin. So melatonin is a sleep aid. It's a natural sleep aid that our bodies produce. It's often prescribed in children that have difficulty falling and staying asleep. I see a lot of children that have a prescription for melatonin. And actually research shows that exposure to blue light from screens suppresses the production of melatonin more than any other type of light we could look at. We could stare at UV light and it wouldn't have the kind of effects on our melatonin deprivation than the blue light that we get from our screens, our tablets, our phones, etc. And it has something to do with actually how short the wavelengths are of blue light and that having specific effects on melatonin production. So something to keep in mind if your child is having some sleep issues, maybe, I'll talk about my suggestions later, but maybe you eliminate the screen time before bed and you start a different routine and see if that helps with falling asleep. Interesting fact there. Number 2 is what I find the most interesting about our brains and about how screens are affecting our brains. And it's the concept of dopamine production in our brain. So dopamine is a chemical that is released in our brain when we are experiencing something pleasurable. It's shown to be produced during times of surprise and unexpected pleasure. So I have an example for you. I'm outing myself here, but so an example in my own life. Scrolling through TikTok, I find a video that I love. Don't know why. My thing on TikTok is I love watching pottery on pottery wheels. I don't know why it's so soothing to me to watch pottery being made on a pottery wheel, but I watched the video and my brain produced dopamine. It told me, hey, it told my amygdala actually, that pleasure center, it said, hey, this feels good, we like this, keep doing this. And it told me, keep scrolling until you find that next pottery video. It created that loop for me by itself. And I think we can directly relate this to maybe some of you that have older children that do watch YouTube. I don't remember if it was a niece or nephew or if it was a patient, but they showed me the unboxing videos, right? Like that's like a huge thing with kids is like they want to watch other people open up the toys that they themselves want. But anyways, for children that are watching these unboxing videos, every time the box gets opened, that sense of unexpected pleasure produces the dopamine in the brain. It reinforces that they want to watch more and more and more and more. They want to know what's going to be in that next box, what's going to be in. And I don't know, there's like tons of toys now that are like mystery toys, and that's really huge too. And you think about it, and it is that unexpected pleasure that is a key indicator of dopamine being produced. So dopamine in itself is not bad. As I'll mention next, children just don't have that inner voice saying enough is enough. So therefore, they want more and more dopamine gets produced. Dopamine is actually meant to spike and go back down. It's not meant to just be at a high level of production in our brain. So when we just keep watching those TikTok pottery videos, we keep watching those unboxing videos, we are actually increasing our threshold for dopamine. If you will, our tolerance for dopamine is going up. So we need more and more to feel happier and happier. There's some scientific evidence with baseline higher levels of dopamine in the brain leading to some difficulties later on in life with mental illness in teens and young adults. It's almost like they need that instant gratification. They need to feel that shot of dopamine more frequently than people who haven't had that higher level of dopamine consistently, and for the people that are spiking and it's going back down. So dopamine is, and I wrote on here, dopamine feedback loops, because I want you guys to think about it in this loop. It's creating a habit. The dopamine drives and is reinforcing a habit that we ourselves don't have a biological need for. I don't need to watch pottery videos on TikTok to make it through the day. It's not giving me any sort of biological need, but it created a habit. It created it in my head. And as an OT that preaches this a lot, habits are really important to children. It's how they learn, it's how they structure their day, it's how they learn expectations. A lot of development in kids' brains happen through habits that they have. So that we have to think about that as, is that the habit that we want them to have? Is that I have to watch something to feel good, and then I come back down. I have to feel more good, I have to feel better, I have to feel better. So I find the dopamine effect on brains from screen time really interesting. Tons of research out there for you guys to look at. And then my only other thing about dopamine that I had looked up was that the high levels of dopamine are actually leading to impairing children's impulse control and also increasing the demand and need for instant gratification, like I had mentioned before, which makes sense if you think about it. If the dopamine's making your brain tell you that you really like something, it's going to make you want that faster and quicker and more often. So my third kind of scientific information for you guys is the idea of solitude deprivation. So this is an interesting one. Solitude, think of it as the time when you were alone in your thoughts. You're not learning, you're not playing, you're not consuming, you're just there with whatever thoughts are in your head in the moment. You have minimal sensory input, no social interaction. That's solitude. So solitude deprivation is the idea that people are forgetting what it means to be in that state. They're forgetting what it means to be bored. And I'm saying people because this isn't isolated to just children. In fact, I think it's more relevant in the adult population that can take their phone out at any whim, in any moment where they are stuck in a doctor's office waiting for their doctor to pick them up. Parked waiting for your child to come out in therapy. There's no reason to be bored when you have entertainment at your fingertips all the time. But in my field and in OT with kids, I am seeing the effects of their parents aren't teaching them how to be bored or letting them be bored because the parents themselves aren't bored anymore. I'm seeing that affect children's ability to see being bored as a normal experience. And I think that's why some attention difficulties come up too, because I'm bored, I'm not doing anything, I need to do something, even if it's what you were supposed to be doing is just sitting there and thinking or waiting for an instruction. We have kids are kind of jumping ahead and they're saying like, okay, what's next, because they don't want to sit there in their thoughts and be bored. It's very unknown and not typical for them to be feeling that. So I think it's really important as the adults to reflect on the last time you just sat in solitude. Sat outside and just whatever happened outside, whatever horn beeped, whatever tree blew some leaves at you. When was the last time you just sat there in your solitude and didn't pull your phone out after 10 or 15, 30 seconds? So that's just some background information to how screens are affecting our brain and development. So specifically next I'm going to talk about child development. A couple reasons why, so I'm going to go into child development and a couple reasons why all of this information I'm telling you more closely is affecting children. My first idea and thing I wanted to bring up to you guys is this big word called metacognition. So metacognition, by dictionary definition, is the awareness and understanding of one's own thought processes. So to put it simply, it's thinking about your own thinking. Metacognition is something that doesn't even emerge in children until age 4, but actually it continues to develop until age 15. the majority of the development of metacognition happens between ages 12 and 15. So there's a lot of years there where the concept of thinking about your own thinking is not in the kid's head at all, and they aren't able to spend time sitting there and reflecting on their own thoughts. So what does this have to do with our discussion today? Well, as I mentioned earlier, kids are being positively reinforced by the pleasure centers in their brain that they like what they're doing and they are going to simply keep doing it to feel good. Children don't have that ability to analyze how they think about technology and what they're thinking while they're watching the technology. In the way that I can say, okay, Jackie, enough TikTok, enough pottery TikTok for today, you got laundry to do, you got things to do. Kids can't do that by themselves. We need to be that voice for them, and we need to set up the healthy habits because their brains aren't capable until maybe age 15 to do that for themselves. The next concept for child development is to think about their perception of reality. To go back to what I mentioned long ago about the digital world and the physical world being merged for children, it is important to recognize that for children, for young children, what they're seeing is real. That is real life. So no matter how staged you think the sitcom or show is, no matter how fake the pranks on the YouTube video are to you, children are seeing that as something that they really just experienced, and it was really a real life thing that happened to them. So that's really important when we sit there and in our heads we're making judgments like, why do you still want to watch this? What can we be done with this and move on? It's a different sense of reality for them. So lastly, I want to talk about the concept of time and when that develops for children. So kids are just developing the idea of time at age 5 and 6 in school. And really the only concept that they're learning at this age is that at certain times during the day, certain things happen. So for instance, in kindergarten, they might be teaching that maybe they have one of those clocks with the colored sections on it, and they're showing that in the middle of the day is when you have lunchtime, and then at the end of the day, your parent picks you up, and then you have dinner, and they're learning just the concept of when things happen during different times of the day. So that's it. That's all they're getting at 5 and 6. They don't develop that idea of time management and like bigger concepts of time until the adolescent years, which is usually 10 and older. So children also don't have the capability to assess the time that they're spending on screens. They need us to provide them with the structure and the time management for them to be able to manage their other things in life, and to give them timers to tell them this is enough and to provide that structure for them. They don't have that capability yet. All right, so the next section, shouldn't be too excited, but I'm going to talk about the sensory system. So I talked a little bit earlier, as an OT, this is kind of my wheelhouse. I'm not going to go on my soapbox, but when it comes to the complexity of our sensory systems, it is complex in itself, and there's a lot to learn and a lot to know about it. But for today's purposes, I'm going to simplify a lot of the sensory system down. Essentially, we have different senses. Okay, I know that you guys already knew that, so I'll give you a little bit more information than that. So we receive sensory input through our senses, through types of sensory stimuli, and everyone has a different threshold for what type and amount of sensory input feels good and allows their brains to function the best. It's like a fingerprint. Not any two people need the same type of sensory input to feel good, to feel ready to learn, to feel ready to work. I have an example of myself. So I just want people to know that this isn't an issue only with maybe you guys have heard of sensory processing disorder. This isn't just something that's present for those children. In fact, I have an example for myself. So when my movement sensory system is depleted. If I have to sit there and I have to listen to another work meeting that could have been an email, or sitting at my desk, I am not moving enough and I feel lethargic. I feel tired. As we tell our kids, and maybe some of you have heard this, my engine was running slow. I didn't get enough of that movement input to feel alert. And now I'm really low arousal. Excuse me. So I might have some tools up my sleeve that I could use, whether consciously or subconsciously, that improve my state of arousal. And some of these examples might be, maybe you chew gum to stay alert. Maybe you fidget with your pencil. Maybe you tap your foot. Hopefully you're not just like reading other work emails during the work meeting. Hopefully it's something else to kind of compensate and get your body ready to attend to whatever it may be, that very important work meeting. And we do just that. A lot of times it's subconsciously. So children have those same complex sensory needs, but oftentimes, especially in the children I see, it tends to be even more complex than that. And they don't have the capability to come up with all of those strategies that we've learned over the years and years and years. I didn't discover one day that tapping my foot kept me awake over one day. It takes years to kind of figure these things out. And we need to kind of push kids in the right direction of the appropriate type of regulation that they can utilize. How do screens affect this? Well, simply put, screens actually deprive children of adequate sensory input, which is a contraindication to what a lot of people think. A lot of people think that it's providing calming input, and a lot of times that's based on what they see their child, how they see their child react from looking at a screen. They might see their child's physical appearance be less hyper. They might see their child sitting down that doesn't usually sit down, and they think that they're calm. Well, the idea that it's really important to emphasize the difference between depriving sensory input and providing calming sensory input. So you can't just take away sensory input, you can't deprive sensory input in order to lower that arousal. So typically there's some sort of stimuli that a child needs to calm down. So think about a crying baby. You might need to swaddle them. You might need to hold them and rock them. They're not just going to, you just can't move them in a spot with no sensory input and step away and think they're going to calm their body down. They need sensory input in order to calm down. So depriving, the screens depriving children of their sensory input, in more cases than not, is going to actually lead to sensory dysregulation. It means their bodies are not ready to learn. Their brains are not ready to learn. So I bring this up because I hear this a lot, even with some of my closest friends, that after a long day of playing outside, sometimes it's nice to just allow them to relax on their tablet for an hour before bed. So the reason that this concept doesn't quite make sense is that you took a child who maybe was, we took a child who is in a regulated state, playing outside with friends, listening, learning, and now you place them in front of something that could have the opposite effect and make them dysregulated. So hence that dopamine loop. You're putting them in front of something that's just activating the pleasure centers of the brain and not those sensory receptors. So I'm going to interrupt myself right here, and I'm going to say something really important. I've said it a couple times, but it is about balance. So maybe 15 to 20 minutes of screen time after a long day outside while the parents make dinner. Maybe that works for you guys without any adverse behavioral reactions when the screen gets taken away. And then I'm not here to say you need to take that away and you need to change it. It's about that balance for your family. So next I am going to look at what signs to look for if that balance isn't working. and some signs that 15 to 20 minutes isn't working, but maybe it is for you. Okay, so the first couple things here, it's kind of small in there, so you'll just have to listen up. Are we good audio-wise? Everything's good? Okay. So signs to look for that something is not balanced well. Behavioral outbursts, tantrums, extreme meltdowns when transitioning away from screens. We know this is if we know going into giving the child the screen time that this is the pattern and that this is going to happen, then why are we giving it to them to begin with? We're setting them kind of up for failure there. If you're seeing constant and frequent meltdowns after a screen is taken away, this is the sign. This is a sign that their sensory system is not responding well to the amount and type of screen time that they are receiving, and it's not well balanced. Other signs to look for would be aggressive and physical outbursts during or after screen time, an increase in what we call self-stimming. Going a little bit more into self-stimming, some of you parents out there might have heard us, OTs calling this, but stimming is basically a way, that calming mechanism that I went back to about tapping the pencil, it's that on kind of an extreme level, and it's not always very functional. Some stimming can be fine. Fidgeting, for instance, is a form of stimming, and it's not overly distracting, it's not overly dysfunctional, but some stimming, such as excessive biting and chewing on things, chewing on shirts, chewing on pencils, hand clapping, flapping, loud screaming, sometimes vocalizations are a type of stimming. Sometimes we need to help with some more appropriate stimming. So if you're seeing an increase in those self-stimming behaviors during or immediately after screen time, that is a sign that they are trying to get their bodies more regulated, and the screen just kind of took that in the opposite direction. Other signs to look for that there's an imbalance would be that your child is only able to sit for mealtime or structured tasks with a screen being in front of them, being unable to respond to you if they're watching a screen and you ask them something and they just act like they didn't hear anything and that your voice went nowhere. This means that their receptors in their brain are truly being turned off, like I mentioned. When that pleasure center is going around, those sensory receptors are turning off and they actually aren't hearing you. in a sense, their sensory systems are kind of turning off because of the overactivation of the pleasure center, underactivation of all the other parts of your brain. Last kind of sign to look for an imbalance would be needing to use screen time for bribery or positive reinforcement for good behavior. Their brains are already making screen time a reward with that feedback loop. So by us also giving them the screen as the reward, we're doing double duty, and in the long run, we are going to see more negative behavior after we just positively reinforce them for good behavior. So you're almost taking a step backwards if you are seeing the outburst after you take the screen away. So those are some things to look for. I have some suggestions on the next page from a good resource called the American Association of Pediatrics. This is the association that puts out the guidelines for what is healthy and what's appropriate for kids. So in terms of screen time and television and those types of things, they have some guidelines on here. Number one is to limit children's total media time to no more than 1 to 2 hours of quality programming per day. That's one of their guidelines. They suggest to remove televisions from bedrooms. Remember the blue light before bed with diminishing melatonin. They recommend to discourage any screen time in children younger than 2 years old. Really at that age, they suggest they really should encourage active play, promoting brain development such as just talking, playing, singing, reading, all those types of things. Maybe if the screen time is a little bit more on the active side, I'll just bring it up again, the hokey pokey, you're totally introducing a different aspect of screen time to that child, but can you do the hokey pokey without the screen for a child younger than 2 years old is what the American Association of Pediatrics recommends. They definitely recommend that parents need to be monitoring the shows and things that the child is watching. And they recommend that parents should actually view television programs along with children to discuss the content. This is just another way of promoting brain processing and turning those areas of the brain on. If we're talking about it, hey, what color is bluey? Those are the kinds of ways that you're turning on those brain receptors. So let me give you guys some ideas. Let me give you guys some suggestions if you guys listened to me this far and didn't lose you and now you want the meat and potatoes of like, well, how can I help? Like, how can I change things for my family? So number one, interacting with your child while they're using technology is my biggest suggestion. If you aren't at the point where you can take it away from your child yet, remembering that metacognition piece of making them think about their thinking is not there, that if you're there, you can be that voice for them and promote deeper thinking about what they're doing, and it puts more purpose into the activity. It makes it more active. I definitely think starting to shift the type of screen time is another way of not cold turkey, no more this, no more screens, but using it more for connecting and creating rather than that consuming. So finding some alternatives for your child rather than just consuming passively. And then I already said that about talking about what they're seeing and doing. Big section here, big emphasis that the expectations for screen time should be a family expectation. It should not be an individual expectation. So if you are giving your child the expectation that you can't watch screens at all in the evening, but then you're sitting on your couch yourself on your phone, that's a very big contradiction to that. They're not going to understand why. They're going to think that they just did something bad. So the family should really follow a family technology plan, and everybody kind of sticks to it. That'll make more sense in the children's head. Like, this is just the way we do things. It's that healthy habit. They are going to be more hesitant to following the healthy habit if they aren't watching their role models also follow the habits. So some suggestions for a family expectation or family technology plan. Make expectations and structured screen time and plan it into your day, into your week. Don't just let it happen, because I think, as we know, if we don't have some sort of structure, then alterations can happen, and maybe dad accidentally let them use it in the morning, but then you didn't, but mom didn't remember in the evening and also gave them an hour of screen time. So planning it in, planning that structure, planning that expectation. If the child is older, really sitting down and making a plan with the child and talking to them about why you're making a plan and why it's important to limit their screen time and their screen usage. Another suggestion would be using big screens rather than handheld devices like phones and tablets. It is a lower blue light emission from larger screens further away, and it's a different type of sensory stimulation. So you could occasionally have unplugged weekend activities planned. That would be a good way of showing that we can do things and not be bored without our screens. Having technology-free zones in your house that everybody follows the rules for. The dinner table, bedrooms, no technology. And then putting screens away an hour before bedtime is a really good suggestion from the American Association of Pediatrics and myself for that regulation piece and the habit. You don't want to get in a habit of they need the screen before bed. What happens if the screen broke? You dropped your phone in a toilet that day, now you don't have a phone. Does your child rely on that habit and that routine? So screens away before bedtime would be a good suggestion as well. I think in addition to that, providing alternatives is important. Just taking things away without an alternative, especially for younger children that can't find their own alternatives, helps with promotion of play and of social skills too. So encourage independent playtime and also allow them to be bored some of the time. Boredom also often sparks creativity. So if they're bored long enough, they're going to find something to be creative and to have fun. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. That's why my suggestions are pretty general. I think that those are the most important ones to keep in mind. And as an occupational therapist that works a lot with children with behavioral issues, that I do discourage using screens as a positive reinforcer. Again, I talked about the science backing behind this, but also just that there should be other motivators in children's lives other than just screens. And it takes work to find the reinforcer, but maybe something like other toys. You can just have another toy that they get to earn time with, or a special treat. Special time with their family can be a really big reinforcer too. One last note about positive reinforcement and finding the thing that makes them tick and want to do their job right is kids are not always motivated by an external thing. Maybe they are motivated by just your praise and time with you. So every child is different. Don't think every child's gonna like stickers. Don't think every child's gonna like 15 minutes with moms. You gotta really work to find that positive reinforcer. If your child does have a hard time with like verbally accepting directions, you can also try to use visuals for that structured time. So a clock that says when they're going to be using technology, a schedule, a visual schedule, and even a visual timer to let them know when that designated time is up for that transition in and out of screen time. So, and then lastly, if you are sitting here, you're feeling like, I don't think any of these suggestions will work yet, I think it is possible that a hardcore detox from screens might be warranted to reset the habits and routines and that dopamine threshold. So try to supplement. If you are going to do that, you're going to try and take things away and put it back in where it fits. Try to supplement with a variety of sensory input activities, things like heavy work with your muscles, crawling, bear walking, tug of war with a blanket, pushing a basket up and down a hallway if it's nice outside. Gross motor play outside would be an example as well. But then also music, dancing, spinning, messy play with different textures and materials. Those are all different sensory stimuli that could help supplement the taking away of the screen. So I just want to say that it is hard to break habits, but once you try to put those new healthy norms into place, that'll be easier, and that habit can be everlasting. So I didn't leave a ton of time for questions. I really thought I was going to talk for 30 minutes, but I didn't. So was there any questions that came up, ladies, at all? No? Okay. Any live people on right now? Okay. Do you guys have any questions for me, the ones who are on live? I'm going to have our marketing team post these couple resources on our Facebook page later. It's just a link to the American Association of Pediatrics, which I mentioned a couple times. The Children's Media Foundation is actually based out of the UK, but has great resources on the scientific side of things. And then a couple different suggestions for actual handouts and tangible family technology plans that you guys could put into place. So I hope that this was really helpful. No questions? Okay. All right, thanks for sticking with me for almost the full hour. I'm kind of proud of myself for making it an hour. I didn't think I had that much to say, but thank you guys so much. Feel free to message us on Facebook if any questions come up after the fact. Thanks guys for your time today. Bye.